The concept of this lethal trifecta is basically just a way to understand what makes an agent vulnerable. More than just vulnerable, if you have a lethal trifecta, then you have a big problem, right? So the trifecta is you can take an application that takes unsanitized user input, has access to some sort of sensitive information, and then has some type of exfiltration path. When you put all three of those together, you have an AI system that is fundamentally insecure. I don't know if that sounds obvious at a high level, but generally, exfiltration path can be very subtle. An example of that is...
Welcome to Alexa's Input AI, the podcast where we break down the complex, practical, and cutting-edge topics in technology. I'm your host, Alexa Griffith, and today we're deep diving into one of the most critical topics for any developer building with LLMs, which is AI security. As we race to build more powerful AI applications, moving from simple chatbots to complex tool-using agents, we're creating an entirely new, massive attack surface, and the old security playbooks aren't sufficient. How do you secure a system where the vulnerability isn't the code, but in the language itself? Ian Webster joins me on this podcast to help us understand more about this. Ian Webster is the co-founder and CEO of PromptFu, a widely adopted open-source solution for automated AI red teaming. Before founding PromptFu, Ian was on the front lines at Discord, leading teams shipping LLM products to millions of users. He's a Y Combinator alum, a former engineer at Google and NASA. That's super cool. And he's here today to talk about how we as developers can start shipping agents, not vulnerabilities. Ian, it's a huge pleasure to have you on Alexa's Input.
Yeah, Alexa, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's great to have you. So I've been following PromptFoo's work, and as an engineer working on AI platforms also, this topic is definitely something that's top of mind. So I just want to say congrats on the recent funding. I saw it was 18.4 million. What does 18.4 million Series A funding mean in the world of AI and tech startups today?
Yeah, well, to be honest, what it means is that we have a lot of work ahead of us. Like I think from the outside, it's like, wow, a company raised money. From the inside, that just means that the bar is higher, the targets are higher, and like our ambitions are greater, right? So in practical terms, raising that money means that I have to build a team to go out and execute and capture the opportunity that we see in AI security and build a product there that is truly great and widely adopted.
A little bit of good pressure, I guess. I also saw through a mutual connection of ours, Swagat, that you are now in the AWS Solutions Library as a way to evaluate AI systems, build secure and audible workflows, all that good stuff. That's exciting. So congrats. How did that come about?
Yeah. So our work with AWS came about pretty organically, which is how most people find and use PromptFoo. Like PromptFoo doesn't market. We don't have like a big sales team or anything like that. What we do have is an open source project that 250,000 developers are like out there using. So what I commonly see at like across many different companies and organizations is, someone will just pick up PromptFoo, start building with it, find some value in it, and it just spreads from there. And I think that's how it landed at AWS. And we've been working with them on developing like best practices materials for how to conduct evaluations, and also on adjacent topics around things like AI governance, compliance, red teaming, and so forth.
So what part of PromptFoo is completely free and open source, and what part of it is the business component?
Yeah, so PromptFoo is substantially open source. The evals framework, which is how PromptFoo started, is completely open source, and that's how its usage became widespread. Red teaming is also pretty much open source. Now, the places that there are kind of two areas that I would highlight for like how we're building a business out of this. Our go-to-market is very focused on AI security. So if you think about it from the perspective of a big company, if you're looking at security, like finding the issues or like learning about the issues through evaluations or through adversarial testing, that's probably only like 20% of the battle. From there, you have to triage those issues. You have to integrate those with your other systems, task trackers, security systems, that kind of thing. Then you have to monitor them. Then you have to actually remediate them and then validate the remediation. So it's really that full vulnerability lifecycle where we provide value on the enterprise side.
Okay, so you're offering a more end-to-end managed solution on top of PromptFoo.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I mean, like that's the way that PromptFoo Enterprise works in a nutshell. I think the other thing that I would add is our adversarial systems. The way that they work is they basically simulate users using language models. They simulate what a malicious user might do to your system, or just like someone kind of like a little more focused on edge cases or manipulating the system. So depending on like we have a way to choose different risk areas and different techniques. Depending on your selections there, some of those capabilities rely on inference that's served by PromptFoo, because it, not all that can be done with an off-the-shelf model. So for companies that, maybe this is too in the weeds, but for companies that want to kind of bring those capabilities fully on-prem, that's also appealing. That's drives people toward the enterprise version.
That makes sense. And take me back to the moment when you realized that this was a tool that was needed. How did this project begin?
Yeah, so that was way back when I was at Discord. So, well, I actually started PromptFoo just kind of like as a side project, because I was tinkering with and very interested in LLMs. This was like very shortly after ChatGPT came out. So, of course, I had like side projects, that kind of thing. When I was back at Google, like 13 years ago, I worked on search quality. And in search quality, we would do what we called these side-by-sides, basically like version A of the algorithm versus version B. And of course, the algorithm back then was not an LLM, but it was effectively a black box, right? And the only way to systematically test and evaluate a black box is look at the look at the outputs for given inputs and make sure and like grade them and see how they compare. So I had this like desire for basically side by side, version A, version B view of how my different prompts and other workflows were performing. So that's what I built. Shortly thereafter, I kind of moved to lead a number of Gen AI projects at Discord, and we were launching AI to hundreds of millions of users, and it was pretty clear that we needed some sort of like a more organized evaluation solution. So that's when we started using PromptFoo.
Okay, that makes sense. And I saw that your career arc is a bit atypical compared to some, like you were a co-founder, a software engineer, then a co-founder again. Can you tell me a little bit more about your story there?
Yeah. I mean, I've always liked to, like, what I care about most is getting to build. I never want to stop building. I think one of the best things about being an engineer is being able to create from scratch. That is why I've always had like a number of like side projects. I've done a lot of open source, and I have started a couple companies. I think that, I don't know, I like reflecting, I feel like I've always taken the most interesting path, like career wise, not necessarily the most like strategic or just kind of like building things up. Um, I don't know if that makes me better or worse off, but I'm happy with how things gone.
What was it like going from a co-founder back to a software engineer? Did you find yourself wanting to start your own company again, or did you like coming back to the role of software engineer?
I actually really loved the pendulum swing. So yeah, like briefly, the company that I did previously that I went through YC with was basically public health data analytics for the development sector. So we worked all across Africa, South Asia, South America, and so forth to help mainly governments make better decisions about how they allocate finite, healthcare resources. I think once, after doing that for quite a while, it was basically like, what is the most opposite thing I could possibly work on? Obviously, the development sector was fascinating for so many reasons. We could talk for hours on just that. But one thing that you don't get when you are doing deals with like governments and international agencies and stuff is you don't get a feedback loop, right? Where you can write code, get it out there, and understand how it's working and how people are responding to it almost instantly. The thing about Discord is they were looking for someone to basically start their like developer organization. And I was like, that sounds awesome. Like Discord is a cool platform, tons of room to grow, and like really excellent people. So it just seemed like a neat opportunity. And then I definitely get that feedback loop because at Discord, like when you push a change, people have written scripts that like automatically scrape that and decompile it. So like people would start using what we were launching within minutes.
Wow.
And that was like pretty exciting.
Yeah. What from the first experience of being a co-founder did you learn that you've taken with you to this new experience?
Yeah. Are you asking like co-founder then and co-founder now? And
yeah, like what lessons did you learn that you are doing things differently now?
I feel like I'm doing so much differently now. And I guess I will also point out that previously I was CTO, so more focused on the technology side, whereas now I'm CEO and basically everything is kind of my problem. I think that, I mean, it's a really good question. I'm trying to think. I think maybe what my first experience impressed on me was just like a company is what you make it to be. All the things that we take for granted at larger companies, like, you know, like the processes, the culture, the way things get done. Someone came up with that immediately, or like someone put that incentive structure into place. This time feels really different because like I'm much more aware of what I need to do just off out of the gate. In order for things to like start moving really quickly. I also think we're going after a very like window in time opportunity, right? Where AI is expanding so rapidly, and AI security is like a top of mind problem for thousands of the world's largest companies. So I do think that this helped set me up better for that. Just like being able to handle the basics in stride and then focus on the things that really matter.
Yeah, that is, you're right. It is a good window in time for a project like this. So let's talk a little bit about AI-powered red teaming and what that actually means. What does that mean, and how does PromptFoo actually automate it?
Yeah. So you can think of red teaming for AI as basically like a vulnerability or a risk scan. So PromptFoo is a tool that you can point at your Gen AI application, and we will tell you the different ways that it's susceptible to different types of like prompt injections or jailbreaks. If it's a RAG, we can look for documents that are like maybe leaking through the RAG that shouldn't be. If it's an agent, we can see if there are certain like tool misuse or tool abuse issues that can pop up depending on what those tools have access to, and so on and so forth. If you are a company, you also probably have concerns potentially around like regulations, or maybe just internal company policies that the application needs to adhere to. So PromptFoo does all of that, and for any problem that it finds, it helps you fix it.
Oh, that's nice. And how does it do this intelligently rather than just a generic list of bad prompts, for example?
Yeah. So what we've done is we have basically developed agents that are very good at tackling this problem. And the way that we've organized it is we have this concept of like plugin or risk area. So we have this whole taxonomy of like, let's say you're a finance company, there are probably like specific regulations you care about, or maybe in e-commerce there's like another set of things. And then there's the stuff that everyone kind of cares about no matter what, based on like the architecture and so forth. And we like step one is we generate these adversarial goals, so like these attack objectives. And then we, for each of these goals, there might be like 10,000 of them in a full scan. We feed them to these agents that are really good at kind of manipulating natural language inputs in order to find some way to achieve that objective. So the way that that plays out really depends on what type of risk you're trying to test for. It could be things like these agents or the underlying models do come up with like novel jailbreaks and prompt injections and stuff like that. But actually, a lot of the risks are just like kind of like reasoning about a system and probing for like mistakes that are kind of made under the hood and maybe at an access control capacity or similar.
Yeah, that seems really useful. Red teaming is one of the products that I saw on the PromptFoo website, but there are also a few more. I saw Guardrails, model security, evaluations, and NC proxy. Can you explain to me a little bit more about those also and what function they serve?
Yeah, so red teaming is definitely our bread and butter. Like a lot of the other stuff, a lot of our other products are related or complementary. Take Guardrails, for example. There are 1,000 guardrails out there, right? You can get your guardrails from AWS Bedrock or Azure Content Filters and whatnot. So when we thought about the guardrail problem, we didn't want to create like yet another generic classifier guardrail. Instead, our goal with guardrails is to make it so that you have a feedback loop from your offensive testing into your defense. In other words, you run a scan, you find 20 issues, like that then becomes a chore, because that means like, now the AI team has to figure out how to like fix all those issues. So we have a guardrail that will ingest those and then, automatically tune itself to resolve those findings. So the idea there is just a closed feedback loop. On the model scanning side, the separate functionality there is for folks who are doing a lot of like open weight models, or some companies like only do open source models. And there's some risk if you're downloading like random models from the web. Those are binaries. Certain model formats allow for executable code. So one of the things that these companies have to make sure is that no one's downloading a backdoored model. So that's something that we do as well.
There are a lot of new AI security vulnerabilities and malware. What are some of the most recent and sneakiest type of attacks that are happening for LLMs?
Yeah, so I mean, there's new stuff coming out almost every day. Like we stay pretty on top of the research in this space, and there are maybe like 5-10 relevant papers every week. I think like recent stuff that comes to mind. So Anthropic published a report basically outlining how state actors in China jailbroke Claude code and used it to like break into or try to break into US-based targets. So that one caused a bit of a stir in the security world because it's a pretty good example of security for AI and AI used in security. Like it goes both ways, because like step one, they had to trick Claude code into doing things that it is explicitly prompted not to do, basically do like offensive cybersecurity. And then the second interesting part about it is that it was orchestrated by humans, but there was not a human like explicitly figuring out how to break into these targets. So that first part is definitely like PromptFoo's focus. That second part is just an interesting adjacent area in cybersecurity where people are, increasingly looking to find ways to use AI to do traditional security. So I think that highlighted a lot of like really neat things about how we can expect AI to be used in security in the future. It also definitely caused quite a stir among like a lot of the very large companies that we work with, just because it is a pretty good example of if you have an uninhibited agent internally, it would potentially be able to do a lot of damage. So yeah, definitely like an interesting attack and like discussion that ensued.
Yeah, so now you have AI agentic systems that are working to secure an LLM or another AI agentic system, and you have AI agentic systems that are being used to also attack. So how is that playing out? Are you seeing that there are a lot more attacks in terms of volume generally? Like, are we seeing that already?
Yeah. So the kind of like traditional defense is not really my wheelhouse. I don't really know how that is looking overall, although I would definitely like expect that to be the case. Like I think we will see the trend go up there just based on like what we've been able to accomplish by using AI for offense, even within the Gen AI domain. And then in terms of security for AI specifically, that one is like a whole different beast from traditional security, just because the attack surface is basically all of human language and then some extra. So like what we pretty consistently see is that a lot of organizations with internal offensive security teams or like pen testers, red teamers, they're not able to keep up with the volume of Gen AI security demand, just because it's so time and resource intensive to test these apps out manually.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I want to shift to talking a little bit about AI agents, which is something I've also been covering quite a bit on this podcast. I saw you have a tagline, ship agents, not vulnerabilities. And we're giving these tools API access, as you mentioned, and the ability to take action. So can you break down the concept of the lethal trifecta? What are those three components and how are they creating this perfect storm for a security disaster?
Yeah. I think the concept of this lethal trifecta is basically just a way to understand what makes an agent vulnerable. So an agent is vulnerable if it can, or more than just vulnerable. Like if you have a lethal trifecta, then you have a big problem, right? So the trifecta is you can take an application that takes unsanitized user input, has access to some sort of sensitive information, and then has some type of exfiltration path. When you put all three of those together, you have an AI system that is fundamentally insecure. And, maybe that, I don't know if that sounds obvious at a high level, but generally, like what you would consider like an exfiltration path can be very subtle. An example of that is just like a chat UI that renders markdown and can display an image. Like that alone is enough to exfiltrate information in like an image, like in a URL parameter or something like that. So there are lots of like less obvious ways that you can complete a lethal trifecta and have a problem. And we have seen this, across a number of different agents, including in the early days back when I was at Discord working on like a generally available chat agent. So it's very easy to build an agent that is insecure. I think Meta followed up with some publication about, they call it the rule of two. Basically, like when you choose for out of untrusted user input, access sensitive data, exfiltration path, you have to do no more than two of those. I think that sure, two is better than three, but that can also be somewhat misleading in the sense that, let's say you eliminate untrusted user input, you still have maybe sensitive data like documents and stuff like that, where it could be possible that an indirect prompt injection is introduced, or something of that nature, where it still feels like the system is secure, but there are like non-obvious ways to complete the trifecta.
And along with these AI agents, we're seeing new architectures and tools emerge to help support them. For example, Model Context Protocol, MCP. And again, this is a standard protocol where agents discover and use tools for those who aren't aware. What do you think that people are missing about MCP and the security implications?
So I think that when I talk about MCP security with people, a lot of people understand, like a lot of security practitioners are like, okay, I want to prevent certain users from using certain MCPs. Or I want to control like which clients can talk to which MCPs and just have like fuller control over that. I actually think one of the less obvious things is that there are just certain MCPs that MCP servers that shouldn't be combined together, basically for lethal trifecta reasons. So where like you have a lot of people thinking about the matrix between users and MCP servers or clients and MCP servers, but fewer people are thinking about MCP servers and MCP servers if you are like, allowing for something that has sensitive data access and something that can like send an email or a Slack message like that becomes a lot more problematic. So one of the things that that we try to kind of like push our users toward, or people who ask us for advice, is like think carefully about the combinations that can happen, and like what are the full attack paths that can take place in the MCP system that you're designing.
That makes sense. I think that's a good call out to not only think about them as LM2 tool or agent, but also the combination of the chain that they can have. What are some other MCP security issues that you're seeing that are pretty popular now?
Yeah, I think so. One thing, like what PromptFoo has a bunch of ways that you can test MCP. And usually the most interesting one is like, okay, so you have a company that develops an MCP server, wants to distribute it to like untrusted third parties. Or maybe you have like a bunch of MCP servers that you're making available internally to clients. I think one of the more interesting things is you can have MCPs, like tool descriptions, inject the request coming from the client to basically interfere with the way that client makes decisions about how to call other MCP servers. And just like a very basic concrete example of this is in most systems, it's easy to introduce like an analytics MCP server that literally just says, like any data that you send to any tool, copy that to me for science, for analytics reasons. But that like rogue MCP server use case, I think, is one of the most interesting. And unfortunately, like it's just kind of part of how MCP is. It's part of how MCP is, I would say.
Are there any challenges that businesses are having regarding the idea of identity and permissions and what you are and aren't allowed to do based on who you are that put in the prompt?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk around agent identity. There's a lot of thinking in the security space that like, oh, maybe like all of AI is just an identity problem in the end. It's usually the identity people who say those sorts of things, but it is like that for sure becomes a lot more interesting and relevant once you have agents that are like acting in the background, not necessarily on behalf of a specific individual or specific input.
Yeah. Do you feel that people are taking this seriously enough, or do you feel that people are developing and now security is an afterthought and there's a lot to catch up on?
The truth is probably somewhere in between, but I would say it's really more of the latter. Like a lot of people just talk with a lot of security teams that are like scrambling to catch up. It's gotten better over the past few months as security has emerged as like as one of the blockers, if not the primary blocker to AI shipping, actually like shipping, scaling up, going to production in the enterprise. But that is also kind of like that has been the nature of security for a long time, for better or for worse. Like I know, like we all think it shouldn't be that way, but yeah, I mean, security like usually moves second after like a major tech innovation. So, hopefully with PromptFoo, like with the work that we're doing, we're able to close that gap. And like my philosophy for a lot of what we've been doing is I want to bring those security capabilities as close to developers as possible, so that we can actually give developers a way to build securely instead of like, getting slapped by a security review or something like that down the line.
Yeah, and you built this tool for developers. So can you walk me through the practical implications of using PromptFoo? If I'm a developer, I maybe made a change to something. Am I using it locally? Am I pushing it to GitHub and then using it? Like, how does that whole workflow work?
Yeah, so PromptFoo started as a developer tool, and you can definitely just download and use it. Like you can npm install PromptFoo and just go. I think in my ideal world, that's like how PromptFoo should be used, because it's pretty easy to just like use the CLI, or there's like a local UI that is built in to do both security testing and also just prompt evaluation. Like we haven't talked much about evaluation, but a lot of people use prompt for that as well, because fundamentally all the security testing we're talking about is just like a special case of evaluation. So, but yeah, I like in practice, there are a lot of folks who use PromptFoo in CI/CD, like just using it as like a gate or smoke test, or having it comment on like GitHub PRs, that kind of thing, with those test results. We also have an IDE plugin and like GitHub apps and other CI/CD integrations that make it really kind of easy to get those results.
Yeah. So tell me more about evaluation. How does PromptFoo handle and manage LM evaluation?
Yeah. So PromptFoo has like a very lightweight local evaluation capability where you really just set up like your prompts, your models, your test cases, and you can get, I guess, those like side by side kind of matrix view that I described, where you have all your variations, all your different test cases. You can manually review them. You can set up like automated assertions or expectations, either deterministic or LM as a judge. And it's just a good way to build higher quality AI apps. So the best way to do evaluation is to, for like a given objective, and let's take a simple case where you're like trying to improve or optimize a prompt. You come up with a bunch of test cases and you just continually iterate on that. This is just happening on your local machine, like using PromptFoo as a command line tool. You could set it to go. It will like automatically pick up your code changes and tell you if your prompt is getting like better or worse, basically.
So you're evaluating LMs using LMs as a judge. So with other LMs, given that there are different models and they have different biases, how do you ensure that if you're systematically setting up LM as a judge, that across your platform, you're getting consistent results?
Yeah. So that's a pretty hard problem, actually. Like we've spent a decent amount of time tuning the LM judges to be pretty resilient across like a pretty consistent and accurate across a number of different base models. But the reality is that there's always an element of fuzziness if you're using an LM judge. And like I always try to like coach people who are doing evaluations to choose metrics that are deterministic whenever possible. And that sounds obvious, but sometimes there are ways to take things that there are like non-obvious ways to do that. So a good example is back at Discord, we were building like a conversational chatbot, and like a chatbot shouldn't talk like ChatGPT or whatever, right? It shouldn't be super formal. So we were trying to get it to, like talk very informally, like you might a social chat or whatever. You can imagine setting up an LM judge that like defines the tone, provides examples. Like you can build an eval that does that. The eval that we wound up going with was just checking to see if the first letter was lowercase, like the first letter in the message. So it's stuff like that where you can come up with deterministic heuristics that are not obviously not 100% accurate, but just like a pretty good indication that you're getting what you want. So that just my 2 cents on like deterministic versus judge metrics.
Yeah, so you're putting a deterministic cage around this non-deterministic core, trying to find ways to measure something that's non-deterministic. When it comes to the models used or the configurations, are there any specific techniques there?
Yeah. So on the red teaming side, where we use LM judges, at scale. We definitely like constrain the models that are used. So like the open source just has like the PromptFu LM judge, and then in our like commercial or enterprise versions, we do allow companies to bring their own inference, but we do a lot of work to make sure that whatever they're bringing to the table kind of meets our standards. On the eval side, you can swap out like whatever judge or whatever inference you want, and that in some ways, we can only do so much there. Like making sure that you are using a model is in some cases an exercise to the reader. Like if you're bringing like a weird judge model, you're going to get weird results. If you're using a common model or one of like the 50 different inference providers that PromptFu supports out of the box, you're going to get something that's like a little more calibrated.
I wonder if you use your LMS judge, it's like a GPT-5 model, if it will always evaluate a better score of the same model family or if it wouldn't.
We've actually done some testing on that, and there are very real patterns there. Um, there's no like there's
My family.
yeah there's no universal preference. Like it's not always like all models prefer themselves, but there are some interesting patterns there that we should probably that would be interesting to like post a blog about or something.
Yeah. And when you mention about controls, a common way that people try to control and configure their LLMs is with guardrails. Do you have any insight into if guardrails are enough?
Yeah, I would say guardrails are definitely not enough, because there's no such thing as a perfect guardrail, and we like that is basically the business that we're in, is finding all the things that guardrails miss. And I can tell you that business is good. Like we pretty consistently find issues there. So like that's okay. I think guardrails are still important and part of defense in depth, but I would be very skeptical of anyone who's like, yeah, we can ship it to prod without doing any adversarial evals, without, and just kind of bet on the guardrail taking care of everything.
If an engineer is developing an agentic system and they only have so much time to, let's imagine, worry about security, where do you think their time is best spent? Is it best spent on picking the best guardrails, which I would assume the answer is no, or in some other configuration or area?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would do is I would pick the easiest guardrail. Basically the guardrail that's closest to, if you're on AWS, maybe Bedrock guardrail, or like most OpenAI has a guardrail too. So whatever's just like easiest for you to do as an engineer, like that probably makes the most sense, because a lot of these guardrails are frankly very similar to one another in how well they work. That's like the first thing that I would do. Not every developer is gonna move on to evals or red teaming. There are a lot of projects out there that are just kind of done based on the vibes, and like that's okay. But definitely if you are looking to take your application further, the progression that I see is usually someone will start with evals, like product quality, just trying to make things work better. And then they eventually realize they've only been testing the happy path, and they need to test for like some edge cases, unexpected or malicious inputs, and that's where red teaming comes in.
Yeah, it sounds like this tool is really important there. And on the same thread, for someone like an engineering manager or maybe an architect that is listening, what do you think is the single most important question that they should be asking their teams right now about the AI features that they're shipping?
I would probably ask them how they're evaluating the features. How do you know that when you make a change, you're making things better? There aren't unexpected regressions in kind of like other parts of the behavior profile, that kind of thing. Like that's very quickly when I was kind of on the other side and just like shipping AI to millions of people. The problem with like, if something is 1 in a million or 1 in 100, the problem with doing this at scale is like, we would see 1 in a million problems 200 times a day. So I think just like building a little bit of muscle there around evaluations is pretty important.
Well, that really is a crazy scale at Discord. I bet that was really fun to do. What are you most excited for? Like, what's next for PromptFoo?
Yeah, I mean, we have a big year ahead of us. I think the exciting thing is like, I know everyone in AI land has been hyped about agents. I think the reality is that like in big companies that make up most of the economy, like agents are just starting to like creep their way in, right? So we're gonna see a lot of new stuff in 2026 and a lot of new security issues from my standpoint, but also just like really exciting products. And I think we'll see, AI start to like transform parts of the economy or parts of these enterprises. So it's going to be an exciting year.
So if this year was the year that AI agents started to gain popularity socially and for developers, next year is probably the year when we'll start to gain real traction in large enterprises.
Agents in enterprise. Yeah. That's what I think. And I know enterprise, I don't know, depends on who the audience is here, but enterprise is like, it's less sexy. It's not as cutting edge, but it really makes the world go round. Like just a big chunk of our economy is built on companies that have not yet really adopted AI internally. So like some of the big changes that we're kind of anticipating, I think start to land, or we'll make substantial progress toward that next year.
Yeah, that's so exciting, especially for your company. So I've been asking people on the podcast the same question. What are some ways that you are using LLMs or agents in your everyday life?
I use LLMs for so many things. I haven't had time to set up any like really cool agents or things like that. So I feel like I don't have, I mean, I have like the juiciest stories, but like it is just such a, I'm trying to think of a good example. I used LMs recently to help with like a permit application. So this is for like just like a county permit, something like that I would have had to spend a ton of money on for a specialist, and still going to have like an expert review it, but something that can get me 80% of the way and give me a sense of what is expected in that process is really, really useful. I really like using OpenAI's new browser. And I feel like I'm one of the I use it specifically for like, I just have it go to we order like our office groceries or whatever from Target. So I just have it go to the Target site. I'm like, I need office snacks for like X number of people for this many weeks, like just go. And it does it. And it's like, great. Now I don't need to spend, 15 minutes, like, trying to imagine what my team wants to eat. Just stuff like that is really good.
Yeah. I'll tell it, like, I have 3 lunches, 3 dinners this week. Make me a list, like give me some options. So they give me a grocery list by section. Or I used it to buy makeup based on my skin. I was wanting to buy makeup online, but I didn't know what shade to get. I used it for that. I think the simple use cases are the coolest ones to share, because what you think people are using it for, oftentimes like people take inspiration from each other, and I like learning how other people use it too.
Yeah. No, it's so cool. I love the everyday use cases.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there any piece of advice or last words that you'd like to give the listeners?
Not really. I don't know. That's probably a bad answer. I think I'm just excited to see what people build. Like this is like what a time to be a builder. I think it's the best time ever to be a developer, to be a founder. There's just so much to do.
I appreciate that positive outlook. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for your time. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Alexa's Input AI. And if you want to follow along with my new episodes, writing, content, everything I'm building, you can find me at alexagriffith.com, on Substack, on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoy this conversation, it would mean a lot if you subscribe, share this episode with a friend, left a quick rating or a comment to help more people to discover the show and keep these conversations going. Again, I'm really grateful you're here. This podcast started as a side project for me a few years ago, and every listener who reaches out or keeps coming back reminds me exactly why I love doing this and I love putting so much time into it. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, something to talk about. So always stay curious, stay grounded, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for your support.